If you keep the digital core at the center of the experience, then you never lose track of the telemetry of all of your attendees inside the experience you're hosting them in.
Welcome to Virtually Live by Kaltura. Every week, we'll get into the latest and greatest in marketing, and specifically event marketing, audience engagement, and brand experience. To guide us through that, we've invited event professionals and marketing leaders from various industries. In this week's episode, Kaltura's Executive Vice President Corporate Marketing, Lisa Bennett, speaks to Corporate Vice President Global Events, Production Studios, and Marketing Community at Microsoft, Bob Bejan, about how not only are virtual events here to stay, but how all events will center around a digital core. Let's go!
Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Lisa Bennett, and I'm excited to join you virtually live from our studio here at the Virtually Live headquarters. This next session is a great one. Every time we think that we've got virtual events, pretty much figured out, everything changes, everything evolves, just like all good things in life. So that's a good thing, because that means that we're moving forward. And I'm very delighted to actually be joined today by Bob Bejan, who is VP of Global Events, Production Studios, and Marketing Community at Microsoft. And Bob has been in the industry and the event game for a very long time. In fact, one of the shakers and movers, literally, by the way, of the event industry. And I'm just so excited to have you today with us, Bob. So welcome, welcome. Maybe you can introduce yourself and we'll get started.
Well, I think you did a great job. I am Bob Bejan. I am Corporate Vice President at Microsoft. And my responsibilities are, experiential marketing, events, our studios operation, as well as the marketing community around the world at the company. Amazing.
So you actually joined us last year as part of our leadership panel, which was fascinating. And I wanted to ask you, we did a lot of talking back then, but what's changed since then from an event perspective at Microsoft coming out of the pandemic and moving forward?
Well, I think, everything, again, kind of a little bit, but what's changed, I think, is that even with this idea of returning to some kind of in-person componentry, to the events that we're doing, there is a wholesale change that there is this not only acceptance, but a real embrace that the progress we made in discovering the power of the scalability of the inclusion of digital delivery, what we now call the digital core of any of our events, isn't going away. And in fact, really is the centerpiece of everything we're doing. And the adding back of the in-person component of event experiences is really much more about a local and regional activation in conjunction with the delivery of the digital core than it is about a return to big destination-based events the way we used to in what we think of as the before time now.
Absolutely. That's fascinating. So you actually coined the term digital core, I believe. And I feel as if it's something that I'd love to hear even a little bit more about. So when you guys are looking at the digital core and kind of what goes around it regionally, what has worked in terms of how those two experiences mesh together, if at all? What's the experience? Is there engagement between the audiences, et cetera? Tell us a little bit more about how that digital core actually plays out.
No, I would say they not only do they play together and play well together, they're incredibly enmeshed with each other. And I'd even go one step further and say that the notion of a global audience sharing an experience together is kind of hinges on the ability to get everyone, whether you're sitting at home, kind of in your home office or in your cubicle or office at work, or in a group of people in a conference room doing it together as a group, or in one of these regional activations that could have anywhere from 150 to 1,500 people in those activations, having everyone share that digital core experience and participate in it and make that the fabric that brings all those pieces together and all those people together. That is the alchemy, I think, and the essence of creating a shared experience that is simultaneously held, in the digital space and in in-person activations as well. And, we did it for the first time in May with our developer conference Build. We did it in 6 locations, right? We still made the digital core straight in the studio, and it worked great. I mean, it was amazing. But the thing, where it didn't work were the places where we really did not fully appreciate that the way you stage things in person is different now than the way you used to do it in the before time. Things like, you don't create traditional theaters. They're more like modern work spaces, hang spaces where people can experience the digital content either alone, working at a workstation, or in groups, or in viewing areas where you have larger screen surfaces. So the way you think about the architecture and the flow of space is totally different. And then we took all that learning forward into July, and we did a lot of experimentation with our kind of global sales force, which is huge, 60,000 people around the world. And so we literally we did the digital core delivery and staged live in-person activations in 62 locations simultaneously. And, it was a logistical kind of craziness beyond what you can possibly imagine. But the thing that was wild about it, and our head of sales said this, to Satya and his senior leadership team, because we did a debrief about it afterwards. And he goes, going into it, there was so much skepticism that we weren't going to get this sense of camaraderie or spirit around the world. And he goes, coming out of it, he goes, I think if you talk to any of the 60,000 people that took part in it and said, were you part of just this one small event, or were you part of something that was bigger? He goes, I think everyone would feel like they were part of something bigger. And I was like, wow, man, that's about as good as it could possibly get, right?
That's really amazing, because indeed, I think many marketers and event professionals, and even, other programs that are digital experiences, struggle. And a core theme of what we've been talking about at this event is indeed, how do you get that engagement? Can you create that magic, if you will, between what we experience in an in-person event or joint experience, as opposed to the digital? And I think that, you've just proven that indeed you can. It might be different, but for sure, there's a lot of benefits there as well. So let me ask you, we both agree that virtual events aren't going anywhere. And indeed, neither are the in-person ones. So you've talked about kind of the digital core and whatnot. From your perspective, when you think of the term hybrid events, right, is that interchangeable there? How do you really think that, the virtual experience can actually benefit that or enhance that in-person experience in that event? You've talked a little bit about the architecture of it and the spaces, which is fascinating, but give me more there when you think maybe also in terms of like the overall strategy. So when you're thinking of your overall event strategy and hybrid, event, I want to say planning from the get-go.
Yeah, so I'm going to be maybe a little contrarian, maybe not, but I often get engaged in conversations around this notion of what a hybrid event is, and people get into this thing about going, you have to do 2 events. It's there's a digital event and then the in-person experience, and I kind of just go, I just don't believe in that, right? I just think what we're making is a new kind of experience, right? And I think, look, there'll be people and there'll be events that look for a period of time, just like the same as it ever was, right? And there are right. Many producers around the world that are racing to get back to, for a whole host of reasons, and there's nothing wrong with any of them. But personally, my personal opinion, I don't think it's sustainable over a long period of time, and as we continue as the human race to deal with global warming and the conditions we've set for ourselves, we're going to have to make some changes. I also don't think coming out of the pandemic, at least for a couple more years, that most CFOs in companies are willing to put back the full T&E that they had in their balance sheet in 2019. I know we're not doing that at Microsoft. I don't think I don't see how anybody in there kind of can see their way clear to do it in good conscience. And because that's true, then there just won't be the ability to kind of get on planes to go anywhere for a week to do these things. And so because that's true, I just think like the building of the question to me now is can you create a situation where you can get the best of what I think in-person experiences are, which is really a combination of being able to network, communicate, share stories, commiserate, a sense of fraternity in the best sense, not in like a drinking and pledging kind of way, but this camaraderie and esprit de corps that you get from community. And then the serendipity of seeing people that you didn't see or cross paths because you're in the same industry. Those things are key, but the truth is like you don't need to put 25,000 people in Orlando, Florida to make that work. You only need to get about 500 or 600 people before most human beings feel like they're a part of something that's big. And this was like a huge epiphany for us in July when we did this like 62 activations. There were really only about 8 of them that had about 1,000 people. The rest of them were like 100, 200, 500. And the truth is, in those groups, you get the best of an in-person experience. And you do get deep emotional connections because why? Because you're not spending 5 hours going from one end of Las Vegas to the other end to get to your next session because there's 30,000 people in town and, we've had to book the whole city. And so yeah. I think there's so much it's a red herring to think about them as separate. They're absolutely intertwined, and it's just like that is what it's about.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. Well, Star Wars has its pull regardless of if you're into it. Absolutely. Awesome. I love the vision, and I really love the way how you kind of are looking at this, and indeed, it's about, I agree with you, finding kind of the best of both worlds or the best of all worlds and making that work to your advantage. I have a question. I saw that you mentioned in one of the talks that you gave something around having, the digital core and then the physical activations and then data showing that some of the in-person attendees were actually watching the sessions from their hotel rooms. So they were at the event. I'd love to hear more about kind of what you saw there and if there was any data that kind of indicated what that was all about and, what your lessons were that you learned from that type of scenario.
The thing you're referencing is actually a great story from the before time, and it's worth telling. So this is the second year that we brought the sales organization together in Las Vegas. So 2018-19, and we had 15,000 people there. So, still relatively small percentage of the sales force when you think about it, but this huge investment that Microsoft is making to get 15,000 people there in person. And we streamed, of course, the keynote days, Satya and Judson, our head of sales and that kind of thing. And so that part of it, we had data, and we were already in the events team, or at least my kind of like thumping on the, kind of my soapbox at that time was with our executives was don't kid yourself. Like even though you're standing in the T-Mobile arena and you think you're giving a theatrical performance, you're not, because, everyone is watching the big screens. They're not looking at you. They're looking at the TV and trying to make a case for more television-like performance. And, anyway, so we're looking at the data after that summer and that July, and we're looking at like, where are all these logons coming from? And it's like 702. It's like, what? And then it's like, oh my God, it's like people are staying in their hotel rooms ordering room service instead of getting over to T-Mobile Arena in the 110-degree heat. And that was like, and that statistic led to us pitching in 2019, right before the pandemic, or the summer, leading into the summer before the pandemic. We pitched this thing and said, look at the data. Like we did this thing with the senior leadership team going like, this is the reality. So why don't we create a digital core and then do 15 activations in all the key areas across the world? Because we'll be able to bring several thousand people together in each of those places. We'll cover much more of the sales force. We thought this data-driven, very compelling case. We got laughed out of the room. Like, I remember my boss, Chris Capsella, going like, that could have gone better. Like it was like, it's like,
well,
but the thing that's wild about it is
laughing now, right?
it ended up being the blueprint that kind of helped us accelerate, back when when January hit and it turned to 2020 and things went, because at least we've been thinking about it a little bit.
Yeah, that's true. And I think, that when I've been hearing you for a while now and following you and whatnot, and indeed, you really have this as a vision and, as a philosophy, and as a strategic way of looking at things. And I love it. I really appreciate, the way that you look at things. And it's helpful for other marketers like myself and our audience today to really see one of the biggest companies in the world actually take a very innovative approach to looking at things when it comes to a huge part of our marketing budgets, our marketing funnels, and everything. So thank you for that. Just before we wrap up, Bob, let me ask you, when it comes to engagement and how you measure engagement, both in the digital world and the in-person, maybe you can give a few pointers of kind of what you're looking at and what you consider engagement metrics that you are keeping track of.
Yeah, look, I mean, in a lot of ways, we've tried to get it down to some very simple ones that are, pretty hardcore that we're now really feeling like we can kind of measure. Look, obviously the basics, like any good promoter, how many people do you get in the room, and, how many people register and how many people come to the room, right? The space. So I think attendance is still a key one. I think another key one for us at Microsoft is how many certifications do we generate out of these events, right? So ultimately, in so many cases, it's about us getting people familiar and then more and more expert in our technologies. And so, our ability to generate certifications is another key for us. Then the next category is really is growth, right? Are we generating more opportunity for field sellers, right? Can we say that if you bring your account to an event, you are X times more likely to close business in the trailing 120 days than any other account? And now we know that's true. I'm not going to share the number of times, but we know that now that we have a benchmark, that we have a baseline there, and we're just chipping, making that kind of multiple higher and higher. And then, scale and scope of those opportunities, right? What percentage of total revenue in any given month or quarter are the events we're doing contributing? Because there's that correlation between, like, did the account go? Did that deal close? What was it worth? That kind of thing that we now feel confident that we can understand the contribution events make in those areas. And then the last piece of it is what we used to think of as perception or brand perception, but now I think my boss and I am enthused about it. We now think of as brand love. What is the level of kind of brand love for the brand that we can kind of contribute to the growth of that. And so those are really the three big buckets, right? So this notion of just scale, scope, kind of attendance, growth and efficacy in terms of generating opportunity or closing opportunity, and then contributing to the love of the brand. And now we're pretty rigorous about that. Now we're obviously super like day to day, week to week, but then we report to, Satya and his directs on a quarterly basis. And then that cascades down to kind of all of our business owners and partners and collaborators across the company quarterly. Amazing. And, it's cool.
I think it's interesting because I think the buckets haven't changed that much when you look at kind of before and after, so to speak, of this new digital age. But I think we're just that much better at being able to actually use the data and gather the data and actually analyze it. So it makes it a much bigger case and a much more scientific case, if you will. Yeah,
because it was always hypothetical, right? Exactly. It was always, this is our hypothesis. We have influence. And, people would go, yeah, that seems reasonable, because everybody kind of shares, right? Because everybody would go, oh, I've been to an event. Yeah, I like that brand. You can see it's not crazy talk. But now to be able to put on it and kind of go, okay, if we make that number better quarter over quarter, event over event, year over year, super compelling.
Absolutely. So, Bob, I want to thank you so much for sharing all of your insight and all of this great information. I'm sure that our audience will be able to actually generate both a lot of inspiration, but also practical, lessons that they can take back with them. So I really appreciate you joining me, and thank you so much.
My pleasure. It was great to be here. Thanks so much, Lisa.
Thank you, Bob Bejan and Lisa Bennett, for joining us today. And thank you for tuning in. To give you a little taste of what's coming next week, here's 7 questions and events with Product Marketing Manager at Google, Roman Faminu.
Welcome to 7 Minutes in Events, 7 questions in 7 minutes with an industry expert, Raman Femina from Google. No time to waste, let's go. What's the one thing you want your attendees to get out of your events?
Okay, we know how helpful our products can be to our users. We also know that the missing link between that and the adopting of our products is education. The one thing that we ultimately want to get is going to be that adoption of specific products. And this is why we choose to pursue education, because we feel that that is what's going to help cross that barrier.
What's your favorite way to engage with audience?
Okay, it definitely has to be the leaderboard, beyond, of course, the usual suspects. We use the leaderboard in the program that I'm running now, which is the wider annual journey. And it's just magical how much interaction happens within the leaderboard, how excited people get to, beat each other and get ahead, and how motivated they get when they fall behind. I also find it creates a sense of community and camaraderie almost, because you see that you're not alone in participating in this activity, and it sort of like opens that virtual world and make it a bit less anonymous. And the best thing is that we're finding that you don't even need to offer any prizes. Bragging rights are always more than enough for people to just feel that they're the best and they've done a very good job.
Who would be your dream keynote speaker and no restrictions at all?
Okay, for me, it's hard to pick somebody very specific, but I think it would have to be a natural scientist who can, I think, set the wider context for where we are on this planet, what is going on, and point people to the bigger things in life that really matter. So I think somebody like David Attenborough, Neil deGrasse Tyson would be fantastic. If it can be absolutely anybody, I would summon either Stephen Hawking or Albert Einstein from the dead to give a speech as well.
Which trend in virtual events are you most looking forward to?
I am very excited about the wider exploration of virtual communities as they tie specifically to events. So I think virtual communities have obviously established themselves, but I think historically lots of events have been very much one-offs with very limited understanding of who is there and what are these people doing. And I mentioned the leaderboard. I think that's a great start to it, but we are very happy to see that there's a lot of thinking about, okay, how do we actually make people engaged, make them feel like they belong in a much smaller context of running a specific education event or education program.
What's an event marketing pitfall people should watch out for?
This may sound basic to some of you, but do not underestimate the importance of coaching your speakers. In general, the more confident they look, I find the more likely it is that they will make a mistake, because this means that they will not prepare as well. The best you can do, of course, is to hire a speaker coach. If you don't have that option, then just make sure that you sit with them, talk them through the speech, and actually hear them speak for a bit before making any feedback.
What's your go-to source for personal development info in terms of events and marketing?
It has to be the newsletters. I generally like reading information, and I like it when it comes to my inbox. I always ignore it when it's my personal email, but when it's my professional email, I usually label it, set it aside, and read it on a quiet Friday. My favorite, I think, is the newsletter called The Marketing Analytics Intersect. It's led by a Googler, so I think I am slightly biased here. But I do think that Avinash, who runs the newsletter, gives a very good lowdown of how important analytics are in marketing.
Now, shout out another event professional.
Huge shout out to Ofir and Ruthie from Kaltura, who helped us launch the Digital Champions program this year. You did an amazing job.
Thank you, Raman.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thanks.